understand them, how to transmute them. Hello, welcome. So, today we're going to be talking about how to understand and heal your emotional blocks. So, this is the time of year when we tend to reevaluate what's going on with our lives. We tend to think about our goals and our dreams and our passions. And it's also, unfortunately, the time of year when we start to understand that we're hitting up against the same blocks that we've hit up against before, that we're feeling held back in some ways, or maybe we're even holding ourselves back in some ways. We're feeling like we're not moving forward towards the life of our dreams or towards our goals, or even just towards being the person who we want to be. Maybe just being comfortable in our skin, or having our own back, or whatever the goals and dreams that you have. Oftentimes this is about the time of year that we start to realize that we're not fully living up to those. And usually this is because there are emotional blocks that are occurring deep in your subconscious. So today I'm going to talk about what exactly are emotional blocks, where do they come from, and we're going to do an exercise so that you get to actually transmute them deep in your subconscious using some emotional processing tools that I'm trained in. One that I'll use is called havening, which probably you guys have seen some of my havening videos. And the other one I'm going to use is called regenerating images in memory, which is my favorite emotional processing tool because it really gets below the subconscious, or below our conscious mind and into the subconscious, where the roots of these emotional blocks are. So thank you so much for joining me. Go ahead, if you have any questions, put them in the comments and maybe share with me where are some places you're feeling stuck in your life? Where are some places where you feel like you may be blocked? Because again, likely there are emotional blocks at the root if you're feeling stuck in your life and it's a place where you felt stuck before. Maybe it's a common place. Hello, hello. Yeah, so just to introduce myself, I'm Karenna with Hello Inner Light, and I am a trauma-informed emotional healing coach, and I'm really here to help you understand and integrate and transmute the blocks that are holding you back, the self-sabotaging core beliefs, the old emotional wounds, all these things that live in our bodies and our subconscious minds that have so much power over how we live. And so if you have emotional blocks, some things you might experience is you might just feel lost and confused. You might feel disconnected from your hopes, dreams, and desires. Um, oh, thank you. I'm so happy you're here. Yeah, you might feel disconnected, lost, confused. You might feel like you try something, but you never get enough momentum to actually achieve it. You might feel like you're holding yourself back in some ways. And when we talk about holding ourselves back, I want to just talk about it with maximum compassion, because these things really aren't our faults. We're not consciously holding ourselves back. Again, these are things that are happening in our subconscious mind. So let's go ahead and talk about what are emotional blocks and the power of the subconscious mind. So current neuroscience tells us that 95% of all of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors actually originate in our subconscious mind, which is a pretty incredible thing because we don't really feel in control of our subconscious mind. Half the time, we don't even know what's going on in there. It's in the name, subconscious, right below the level of consciousness. So most of the time, we are identified with our conscious mind. We are identified with our conscious stories of who we are and how the world works. And we don't realize that those stories are being colored and that our perception is being formed by the things that are being held in our subconscious. And again, 95% of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors originate in the subconscious. And so that is incredibly powerful, so much more powerful than our conscious mind. So when we look at what's going on in our subconscious, there are a number of things that contribute to emotional blocks. So when we are kids between the ages of 0 and 7, we are developing really deep and specific mental models of how the world works. And so when we are developing these deeply specific models, we're taking in every little detail from the world around us, but we're really forming mental models in 3 categories. We're forming mental models to tell us who we are. So our core sense of self is being formed in those ages 0 to 7. We're also learning about who others are, what we can expect from others, what we can expect about how they're going to treat us, and how the world works. So, those are the three primary categories. And then these deeply specific mental models become basically implicit expectations that color how we see the world and what we expect from our future, right? So, this is really deeply important because our core sense of self and our core sense of others and the world is formed in implicit ways when we're children. And implicit just means like it wasn't necessarily stated explicitly. You weren't actually necessarily, I mean, sometimes it is stated explicitly, but you take it in on a body level. You take it in on a subconscious level. You just begin to believe that this is who you are and this is how the world works. And what's really, I mean, and this is true for everyone, literally everyone. But what happens commonly is that as children, if we are not really getting our needs met, or if we don't feel important, if we don't feel seen, then we may start to form a core sense of self around being undeserving of love, or being unworthy, or being somehow a burden or in the way. And when I work with my clients, I do go into the subconscious with people on these really deep emotional processing journeys using regenerating images and memory, which is a tool I already mentioned. But when I go in, it is so common for people to have a core sense of unworthiness, or a core sense of being somehow flawed, or a core sense of being somehow wrong or broken or bad. This is just almost every person I think is walking around with some level of this because we don't talk about it, right? We don't put that out into the world. But deeply, when we're working with others, or, people are confiding this in me, I know that I have this deep inside. And I just believe this to be a really, really ubiquitous and common experience, that we have a core sense of unworthiness. And I think this really happens because as kids, we have this thing called self assigned meaning, which means that whatever happens in our environment, we somehow think it's our fault, right? So we somehow feel that we are to blame for the things that happen. So let's say that, our parents are working really hard and super distracted and stressed about money, and they just don't want to play with us. In fact, maybe when we start giggling, they find it irritating because they're so fried and tired, then maybe we will interpret from that, because we have self-assigned meaning. We're not going to say, "Oh, look, they're so stressed. Oh, look, they're so tired." What we're going to understand as a child is, maybe my play is too much. Maybe my giggling is too much. Maybe I don't deserve attention, right? So we create these internalized core sense of self, when we're not really getting our needs met in childhood, when we're not really being seen clearly. And this is, again, I'm not here to blame parents. I am a parent, and I know that I have done my parenting very deeply imperfectly, even though I love my children so, so much. So this isn't about a blame. I'm not playing a blame game. I just really want to lay out how important it is for us to understand that we have these implicit expectations, these expectations we don't even know we have, but they color our perception. It's almost like, there's that saying that we look at the world through rose-colored lenses. I always tease that we look at the world through childhood-colored lenses, because it really is like having a little bit of something coloring our perception every single day, every single moment, because these implicit expectations, this implicit core sense of self, which again is like a feeling sense, it's like a feeling sense in our subconscious and in our body that we may not be able to put words to, but that is deep inside of us. And then we look out at the world through it. So the way that this, thank you guys for the likes and everything. It's wonderful to see you here. So the reason this leads to emotional blocks is that if we somehow feel on a core, subconscious, implicit level, we don't realize that these are things that we've internalized, maybe we feel undeserving. Or, like I said, there are three categories of implicit learnings that we really learn when we're children: who we are, what to expect from others, and how the world works. And so maybe some of our implicit programming or conditioning is around the world is frightening, or others are going to take advantage of you, or whatever. But when we have these deep implicit beliefs, then we just expect that that's how the world is going to interact with us. Like, I have to say, for me being here, I'm making videos all the time. Right now I'm talking live, I'm streaming live. For me to be here, I had to overcome so much insecurity and self-judgment. Not today. I've been working on it for, the past year and a half that I've been making videos, but I really lived my life in a state of anxiety and self-judgment for so long that I think it's miraculous that right now I'm just streaming live. I'm streaming live on TikTok and on YouTube, so that's why I'm looking back and forth. Um, but it's really miraculous to me that I have the courage to be here, that I'm just putting myself out into the world because I had such a core sense of shame that ruled my life for so long. I was so deeply anxious in social situations, so cruelly judgmental of myself that none of this would have been possible just a few years ago because I was so held back by my own fear that other people were going to shame me and my own fear that there was really something broken deep inside. And so you might not be held back in that really big way of feeling a lot of anxiety, but you may have your own little personal implicit core beliefs, that maybe you're not as smart as other people, or maybe you can't trust other people, but all these beliefs. And I'm not even saying they're necessarily not true at all. Oftentimes they're kind of born from some little truth that we did experience in our childhood. But then when we use that little truth that we did experience in our childhood to color our expectations forevermore, that's when it really becomes like, oh, this is too much. We're taking these blocks and applying them and applying them and applying them. But anyway, we are going to be talking about how to deal with these blocks a little bit. Okay, so we have these very specific mental models that were mostly formed between the ages of 0 and 7 that live in our subconscious. Our subconscious is not just our thoughts, it's not just our brain. We call it the subconscious mind, but really it exists in our body. It exists in our cellular memory. It exists deep within us. It's a much bigger thing than we usually think when we just think mind, we think brain. It's so much bigger than that. So I want you to start to understand that. So we have these mental models that can lead to emotional blocks. Another thing that leads to emotional blocks is, like I was talking about earlier, when we're children and we experience overwhelming emotion, we don't know how to deal with overwhelming emotions. Children, especially very young children, cannot regulate their own emotions. And so we can't really soothe ourselves if we feel a really big fear, or we feel really vulnerable, or we feel really embarrassed, or we feel really confused, right? So we have these big feelings. We don't know what to do with them. And so we just shove them into the subconscious and we kind of try to distance ourselves from that. I mean, that makes so much sense, right? Like, have you ever been really embarrassed? Have you ever been humiliated, right? Have you ever been really, really fearful? These things feel terrible. Of course, we want to distance ourselves from them. Of course, we don't want to feel them. That's just normal human behavior, is we want to get away from the pain. But what happens when we shove them into our subconscious is that emotion still exists, right? It's not gone away. There is no shoving them away. There is no away for them to go to. They still exist within us. And so now we have this little wounded or vulnerable piece of our psyche in our subconscious, right? So this little piece of us has been embarrassed or frightened or whatever it is. It's this wounded part of our psyche that we've now kind of disconnected from. We don't really want to identify it. We don't really, or identify with it. We don't really know what to do with it. So we just kind of try to distance ourselves, right? But that wounded part exists in our psyche too. And so this is a little bit of what we call parts work. And the framework that I use for parts work is internal family systems. That's what I've been trained in. And I really love that framework, right? So we have this wounded or vulnerable part in our psyche, and it still carries the emotional charge of whatever wounded it, right? The embarrassment or the shame or the fear or the anger or whatever, right? It can be anything. It still carries that charge. But now that charge is in the subconscious, we're not so aware of it with our conscious mind. But it still has power over us. Like I was saying, 95% of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors come from our subconscious. So these wounded parts, these vulnerable parts, they still exist and they still have power in our lives. And in some cases, they have more power in our lives because they are subconscious. If we can bring them to consciousness and integrate them, then they no longer carry that charge, that emotional charge with them. So when we have these vulnerable or wounded places in our psyche, we also form another thing in our subconscious psyche, and that is a protector part or a self-protective strategy, right? So maybe we felt really embarrassed, and that's the wounded, vulnerable part. And so, an example of a protector part that might come in is like having kind of a grandiose sense of self, like I'm not embarrassed because I'm so extra cool, right? Like that could be a protective part. Or like I was talking earlier about my anxiety. In some ways, I was trying to protect myself because I felt so anxious deep inside. I tried to protect myself by using avoidance. Like I just tried to avoid the world. I didn't go into social situations. I never would have put myself on video, much less a live stream, you know? And so we develop these self-protective strategies. Again, we usually come up with these self-protective strategies when we're children. So they're not necessarily based on our deepest wisdom. They're not necessarily based on our deepest intelligence. Sometimes they're just the problem solving capacity that we have as children, but they become really firmly entrenched in our psyche because we really don't want to feel the pain of that wounded part. We don't want to feel the vulnerability of that vulnerable part, right? We would much rather identify with like, I'm cool, or, like it's their fault, or that person looks embarrassed, right? There's all these ways that we can kind of distance ourselves from what's happening in our own subconscious. And these are called our self-protective strategies or our protector parts. And these protector parts, they want to protect us at all costs, right? They really care about us and they really don't want to see us hurt. So if they think that we might be embarrassed if we go do a live stream, right, they will try to put up any barriers at all to prevent us from doing the things that might embarrass us, right? They will put up barriers to try to shut us down, to try to prevent us from being hurt or rejected, right? They will put up barriers. And so it might look like your inner critic gets really, really loud every time you try something new, right? Like that's a really common one for me, right? I said that in my childhood, my self-judgment was like off the charts. I basically just hated myself. And that lasted through most of my 20s. And now I've done so much work with my inner critic that I'm very rarely critical of myself. And I really love myself and have my own back. But when I'm going to try something new, try something expansive, then absolutely my inner critic gets louder because it's like, no, 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 like too risky, stop. And it's trying to criticize us to shut us down, to keep us from being hurt, which is a little bit crazy. But I think that most of our emotional blocks, most of the time that we're standing in our own way, it really comes from outdated self-protective strategies that are just knee-jerk responses because, again, they exist in our subconscious. But they still exist there, they still have power there, and they are committed to preventing us from experiencing pain. So if some vulnerable part of ourselves thinks that we could be hurt by doing something, by expanding, it will put up a block, right? And these are these deep emotional blockages. So I hope that explains a little bit where our subconscious emotional blocks come from, right? They come from our implicit mental models that we formed when we were children that are deeply entrenched and inform all of our expectations and our perception of the world. They come from these vulnerable, wounded parts, and mostly they come from these protector parts that are just trying to protect us, these subconscious self-protective strategies that don't want us to be hurt, don't want us to try new things, don't want us to push outside of our zone of comfort, right? Our zone of comfort is where we feel at least a little bit safe. And so that's where all of these things are coming from. And so these blocks, there's some sense to them. There's some wisdom to them. There's even some compassion and some love there, right? We don't try to protect things that we don't care about, right? We try to protect things that we care about. So even if your inner critic is standing in your way as a huge block, even if procrastination is standing in your way, even if just when you think you're finally going to get to the momentum, something happens to knock you back down, right? There's some wisdom to these protector parts, and we can't just shoo them away and get rid of them. What we really need to do is we really need to integrate them and update them, let them know, like, I'm big now, I can handle this, I'm not scared. Or, sometimes I've had to tell my protector parts, like, I do make videos and I put them out there all the time. And so sometimes I do get really weird comments or really strong criticism, and I've just had to tell like my wounded, vulnerable parts, like, well, I'll just block people if they're really criticizing me. It's not that I don't want to take any feedback, but sometimes I get unhinged comments, as just happens on the internet and in the world, right? And so I've really talked to my inner child, which carries a lot of those wounded, vulnerable parts. Like, I'll block people who are being unhinged. It's not really unsafe. I love you. I have our back. I can set boundaries in order to keep us safe. And so that's one way that I've learned to deal with one of my emotional blocks, which is just fear of being shamed or fear of being embarrassed, fear of other people not liking me, right? Which is a really normal one. Because again, I said in the beginning, but I want to reiterate, most of us carry around on some deep level some sense of being not enough, some sense of being unworthy, some sense of being undeserving or unlovable or flawed or broken in some way, right? So that is a normal thing. And we can learn to reality check and integrate and talk to those parts of us who feel and believe that. And that's really what we're going to move into next. Is we're going to do a little activity so that you can start to move through your emotional blocks instead of them holding you back. But again, we're not breaking through them. We're not like getting rid of our inner critic. We're not getting rid of these things. What we're doing is we're understanding and integrating, because that's where the real transformation comes in. I mean, we can try to repress our inner critic. We can try to be angry at the parts of ourselves and judgmental at the parts of ourselves that hold us back, but that is not the true way forward in my experience. The true way forward is really a deep integration where you can grow in wholeness, grow in self-understanding, grow in self-compassion, and then these charged parts of our subconscious, they get integrated and they no longer have that power that they had over our lives before that. And so one of the keys of really moving through our emotional blocks is learning how to feel them, right? We can't heal what we can't feel. You've probably heard that a lot of times, but it's really true. We can't heal them if we're avoiding them or if we're not being honest about them. And so the next activity we're going to do is just an exercise to start to feel them and start to understand them, start to have some compassion. If you even just grew your self-compassion for these emotional blocks by like 2 or 3% in this live stream today, that would be a huge step forward. That would be huge progress, because when we're dealing with our subconscious blocks, when we're dealing with these wounded parts of our psyche or these protector parts of our psyche, we're not looking for going from A to B and it's healed and it's done, right? Like that's a very linear conscious mind way of looking at things. What we're looking for is just a little bit more space, a little bit more understanding, a little bit more permission to try something, because that's where the true change occurs. When you just create little openings in your subconscious, you actually create huge ripples into your life. So the goal of the activity is not to get from A to B and then check it off your list. The goal of the activity is really just to make a little bit more space, a little bit more movement. So let's dive into it. Let's do an activity so that we can actually start to heal and transform these emotional blocks. So you can go ahead and do it with me. I can't see you obviously, but I hope that you're at least giving it a try if you can, just to whatever degree you can. So I like to do this emotional processing technique called havening, which just consists of you either rubbing your hands together or rubbing down your arms, or rubbing your face. And if I weren't doing a live stream, I would take off my glasses and I would just like rub my whole face. That's what I really like to do. That's my favorite. But I'll just keep my glasses on and rub my cheeks. But you can do your whole face. And if any of these don't feel good to you, just don't do them. Do what does feel good. So hands down your arms from shoulder to elbow, or anywhere on your face, or anything that feels good and soothing. And as you do this havening, just begin to feel the texture of your skin rubbing against the texture of your other palm or against your sleeves. Begin to notice your breath. Like you can feel the air moving in and out through your nostrils. You can feel the rhythm of your breathing causing your chest and tummy to rise and fall. And you can hear things like you can hear my voice, right? But maybe you can hear other layers of quieter sounds beneath my voice. Usually there's multiple layers of sounds. Like I can hear my heater and I can hear a helicopter or an airplane outside. There might be geese this time of year where you live. So listening and feeling. And then what I want you to do is just think about a place in your life where you feel stuck. Think about a place where you feel like you might be being held back by these emotional blocks, a place where maybe it's a familiar stuckness. Go ahead and bring that to mind, whatever situation it is, or whatever place in your life you're feeling stuck or held back. And as you think of that, your body is going to have a reaction. It might be a tension or a clenching or a discomfort, or it could be anything. But notice where your body has a reaction to that, to thinking about the place where you're stuck. Where does your body feel that reaction? Do you feel it more on the right or the left? Or maybe it's central or everywhere. Is it more deep or superficial? So, again, you're just feeling the stuckness in your body as you think of the place where you might have emotional blocks. Hi, Libby. So, noticing where it is, left or right, deep or superficial. Is it moving or still? Does it have a texture or a temperature? What color is it? Does it have a shape? We're really learning to feel the emotional block in our body because, again, that's how we transmute it in our body and in our subconscious is by feeling it. So just noticing whatever you notice about your body's reaction, where it is, how big it is, what color it is. Maybe it has a shape or an image. And so as you notice that block in your body, you're just going to get more and more curious about it. Like you're going to draw closer to it, bringing your awareness more and more to feeling it and noticing it and acknowledging it, which I know we usually want to do the opposite. We usually want to run away. We don't want to feel. We want to repress. But again, that's how we get more stuck. And as we feel it, we get less stuck. So now notice how much space this block takes up inside your body. And as you do the havening touch, which is this rubbing your arms and hands that I'm doing, just imagine that you could breathe into the height and the width and the depth of this block in your body. What is that like? Breathing into the height and the width and the depth of this block in your body. Going even deeper, noticing it even more. If this block wants to move, let it move and even move with it. And if it wants to get bigger, let it get bigger. I know that seems counterintuitive, but go ahead and let it get as big as it wants to get. And then just really ask yourself, what does this block remind you of? What does this block need from you? It doesn't need to be repressed. It doesn't need to be rejected. Most of the time, it just needs to be acknowledged, witnessed, maybe even had some compassion for. Because again, we already talked about these blocks come from protector parts and wounded and vulnerable parts in our subconscious psyche. So just tuning in with your breath and with the havening for another minute. If this block feels really overwhelming and feeling it just feels like too much for you, that's okay. Just do the havening touch and distract yourself. Maybe sing row, row, row your boat in your head while you rub your hands together. The havening actually is shifting your nervous system. And so as you do this touch, you're actually soothing deep parts of your nervous system, deep parts of your unconscious nervous system, like way deeper than your subconscious, even. And so this soothing can help this block start to shift, start to release. Also, asking what it needs from you helps it shift and release. Noticing what it reminds you of helps it shift and release. But your body has an incredible healing wisdom. And when you start to feel your body and this block, then you're just starting to allow the wisdom of your body to come forward. And like I said, the havening touch allows your nervous system to begin to calm so you can release these patterns on a deeper way. Because deep down, when we are feeling blocked, when we're blocking ourselves, we really do often feel frightened on some level or too vulnerable on some level. We sense that something could be threatening to us on some level. And this is us telling our body, we're safe. Right now, you're safe, right? Like, it's okay. We don't have to hold on to this forever. So, making space for that block, noticing what it might want from you, breathing into the height and the width and the depth of it. Do you notice something shifting? As you do the havening, as you feel your breath, as you feel this block, notice what's shifting. Does anything feel different? Does anything look different? And just breathe with it for another minute or so, and let me know in the comments if anything has shifted for you. I know that this isn't the normal way that we're used to thinking about our emotional blocks. We're used to thinking and talking and just coming from the conscious mind. But the work I do, it comes from the body and from the subconscious. And when you feel a difference, when you feel a shift, that is actually your nervous system rewiring. It's a thing called memory reconsolidation. That is your nervous system rewiring itself around this block. So, again, even if you only feel like a 2 or a 3% shift in these few minutes that we've been doing this exercise, that will have significant ripples out into your life, because when we work with the roots in the subconscious and in the body, then things can open up in our lives in a totally new and different way. All right. So when you feel ready, you can just let the havening touch go. Take a few breaths and just reflect for a minute on any shift that you felt, any awareness that you had, anything that you realize as we breathed and asked this block what it would want from you. Those realizations are really profound. When you can feel it in your body, you can begin to integrate it and move through it. And then it no longer has that subconscious power that it had before. And sometimes when we go into the subconscious, we are rewiring those outdated self protective strategies. Sometimes we're bringing support to those wounded or vulnerable parts. Sometimes we're reality checking those very specific and deep mental models that we formed in childhood that somehow tell us we're undeserving, that we're wrong or bad or flawed in some way. But no matter what you did today, if you felt a shift during our exercise, then you created some difference in your subconscious neurology, in the neural networks that were holding that block in place. So I hope that you felt a shift. I am deeply appreciative that you joined me today. Thank you guys all for your likes and roses and all that kind of stuff. Go ahead and put any questions or reflections in the comments, and I'll hang out for like another minute. If I get questions, I'll hang out as long until the questions are answered. Um, but yeah, that's all that I had to offer today. Oh, I wanted to tell you that I have two upcoming events. One is a paid workshop, one is a free workshop. They're both going to be really, really great. And they're all, surrounded by focused on healing these subconscious aspects of ourselves. So the free one is called Perfectionism, people pleasing, and self sabotage. Real talk and real solutions for the ways we accidentally hold ourselves back. And again, that's free. You can find it at the link in my bio or in the video description. I've put a link there. It's happening February 1st. If you can't attend live, there will be a replay made available to everyone. And it's really about how to work with these self protective mechanisms or these self protective tendencies that we have, because people pleasing, perfectionism, and self sabotage are all ways that we are attempting to protect ourselves. So, anyway, we're going to go deep into why we have those and what to do with them. So, if you want to join me for that, I would love that. I'm so excited. And I'm already, like, I just mentioned it once and I've already gotten a ton of signups. So, I think it's going to be a really fun community event. And again, that's free. And then I have a paid workshop next week called How to Heal Your Inner Drill Sergeant. So, our inner drill sergeant is the part of our inner critic that is specifically conditioned by hustle culture and consumerism. And so, this is it's longer. It's a 2-hour thing, and we're going to go really deep into how to identify kind of the patterns that we're trapped in hustle culture or productivity culture or whatever, and tap into our intrinsic motivation and our innate worth instead of continuing to bully ourselves to be productive. So if you want to join me for that, I would love that too. All the information for both of these things is either in the video description on YouTube or on TikTok. It's in the link in my bio. But yeah, I would love for you to join me. And thank you for joining me today. I didn't get any questions right now, so I'm going to sign off. But yeah, I'm so appreciative for you joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful day. All right. Bye. Let's see. Okay, not even sure how to end it on TikTok, which is really funny. All right.